Sevenths can be a tricky interval to see on the neck, and they can be tricky to hear because of their dissonance. But they're there in some very familiar chords. So let's just take a quick look. For instance, in a C major 7 chord, we've got a C as our root, and we've got our 7th as B. Now, you just take those two alone, and it's a pretty dissonant interval. Very similar, of course, to a minor 2nd, which is the same notes, C to B. But what makes it pretty are the tones that you put in between. So all of a sudden we go from a really harsh sound to something pretty. Likewise, right here we've got, this might sound a little harsh, and you can make it harsher with the intervals that you put in between. But in the right context, they're going to work. And similarly, they're going to work when you pair them up and use them in a melody. They can have a fragile sound, or they can sound kind of harsh. Now, there are a couple of ways to see them on the neck. One way is relative to octaves. So if you had a pair of octave Cs, all you have to do is lower that upper C down a half step, and there it is. Similarly, you can see the octave, and if you want to bring it up, there, D to C is your 7th. Here are a couple of the shapes that 7ths take on the neck, just so that you can get familiar with the way that they fall in your fingers, so that you can recognize them. Down, let's take first with the C as the upper note in the 7th pairs. Right here, D to C is a 7th. There, E to D, and you'll note the note names are, of course, just one name apart. Land back where we started on D to C. On the lower strings, which are the other ones we use in this piece, we've got a C here. Now we've got the C on the bottom, and a 7th above that is B. We're going down from C. Okay. If you want to go all the way down, you got E to D. Open strings are 7th apart. So let's take a look at the way that the 7ths are applied in the exercise. This little piece is based on one of Charles Chapman's melodies. I've taken some significant liberties with it. I've changed it into a 3/4 time. But Charles's melody is all based around 7ths in the key of C. Our chords in it are just D minor, E minor, and A minor 7. So we're actually using the tones from C major, even though we're more in kind of a D Dorian mode here. So we start out with a pair right here between E and D. And all our notes in this exercise, and in the melody as well as in the solo, are all going to be notes from the C scale. Got a pair right there, ascending a scale, continue to ascend. And then we have a little jump here between these shapes. Again, all 7ths. This is another shape that you're going to see. Could have just as easily taken it here, but I wanted to get a little bit of the brightness of the top string, so I went. Recognize that from the shapes we showed in the first part. So I'm essentially using passing tones here and there to get from one 7th pair to another. And I find one of the things I really like about it is that it keeps a sweet melody from getting too saccharine. I could have, if you take the melody on its own, it's going to be pretty kind of nice over D minor 7 and E minor 7. But you do this and you get a little fly in the ointment. So that's essentially the head for our tune. Then when we go into a solo, again, I'm kind of taking melody and just planting these 7th notes underneath. And one of the things that 7th does underneath, by adding a dissonance, it kind of keeps things moving, because they never really sound like they're coming to resolution. So you never really get to sit still. You have a little bit of that. It makes you just squirm a little bit, and that's fun to do to listeners. 7th right there. Kind of a Schofield-y thing there, if I can be so bold. Again, to just go. Now this 7th actually ends up sounding pretty sweet. Kind of nice sounding. So those are all pairs with a couple little passing tones. Then I've got a little bit of a lead line here, a little bit of a... And those are all built on sevenths. Here to here, C to D is a seventh, D to E is a seventh. And you get some really angular lines. You've got a pretty good hop between them. And you want to be careful not to strike those strings in between, unless that's the effect you're going for. Get a nice angular line going. Now here, in this little passage, it starts out, here I've got a seventh, and then it settles for just a second on an octave, but I don't want to make anybody that comfortable, so. Another seventh pair. That's another shape you can use. It's quite a stretch, but certainly works. I could just as easily have taken it here. But I like it here. And then it concludes with this phrase. Arpeggiating those sevenths right up the C scale. And again, like a lot of other interval pairs, when they're in the same shape, it's kind of ideal for sliding between one pair and the next. And it resolves as much as this tune resolves between an F and an E.